Hello, everyone, and welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast presented by DraftKings Pick6. I am Mike Barner. He is Kirien Sprecher, and we're going to be with you every Wednesday during the NBA season to give you all the fantasy basketball information you need to win your leagues. And we're also going to have a lot of fun. So without further ado, Kirien, welcome.
Welcome, man. Looking forward to it. Got a big trade this weekend, so we can hop right into it.
Yeah, it was great for us having our first show here to get some great content off the bat, leave it to the New York Knicks to spice things up for us. So let's get right into it and discuss that Knicks-Timberwolves trade. There was a bunch of teams involved, 1,000 lesser players, and some picks that could end up being first, seconds, or never conveyed at all. So let's just talk about the main players that changed hands here. The Knicks landed Karl-Anthony Towns. The Timberwolves received Julius Randle and Donte DiVincenzo. Kirien, what do you think about the trade?
I mean, this was a shocker. Friday night, late night, kind of just put everybody on notice. The Knicks had already made a big swing this offseason getting Bridges. They had made a big swing last year getting Anunoby. They feel like Thanos collecting these infinity rings, right? Like, I'm totally drinking the Kool-Aid here, right? Like, Cat had some issues in Minnesota, but like overall, he is a very good player. You look at his best statistical seasons, and those came under Tom Thibodeau. So like maybe him coming back can resurrect that a little bit. While I am drinking the Kool-Aid, I do think there are some question marks, right? Just strictly like fantasy reason, right? Like Jalen Brunson's the go-to scorer. I think Cat easily slides into that number 2 option. I think he's averages 20 points per game basically his entire career. So I don't see that declining, especially with getting all of the open looks. But there is the question of Josh Hart, right? Josh Hart is now going to be a regular starter. How many rebounds is he going to steal away from Cat, right? When Mitch Robinson is healthy, is he going to like start at center and they're going to move Cat back to that power forward? And we saw when Cat moved to power forward, his rebound numbers dropped a little bit. He was still, hovering around that double-digit threat every night, but it wasn't quite as dominant as he was before. So I think there are some question marks, but I'm totally buying the Kool-Aid. I think Cat is in a much better spot right now from a fantasy perspective than he was in Minnesota, sharing the court with Gobert.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to break this down from a fantasy perspective, the winners and losers, and maybe some neutral statuses here on both sides. So with regards to the winners, you talked about Josh Hart. I think he probably is one of the biggest winners of this trade simply because Donte DiVincenzo going to the Timberwolves leaves the Knicks with very little depth, especially at the guard spot. Their backup guards are Miles McBride, who's proven that he can be a very good shooter. And then behind him is Cameron Payne. Cameron Payne is garbage. He is just bouncing around the league here. He's landing with the Knicks. I think that Josh Hart is going to be extremely busy. He's going to start. He's going to play a lot. With regards to a stat here, when Randle went down last season, Hart played 66 games after Julius Randle went down. In those 36 games, he averaged 12 points, 10.6 rebounds, 5.8 assists, 1.1 steals, and 1.3 three-pointers. So he played a lot. He grabbed a lot of rebounds. Towns is a good three-point shooter, so he'll be around the perimeter more than probably Julius Randle was. So I think Hart is one of the biggest winners here. How about on your end?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with Hart, there's a little bit of a question mark. He said in his press conference, he's like, I don't want to play 40 minutes a game now again. So like, I think that could take away some of his fantasy value. But like I said, with Randle back, and then they thought Mitch Rob was going to be back, Hart was kind of out of the starting lineup after the acquisition of Mikal Bridges. So I think with Cat back there, Randle gone, DiVincenzo gone, I think Hart is going to start and he's going to be able to rack up stats. And you can't really get those types of rebounding numbers from a guard position. So I definitely think Hart is a winner here. The Miles McBride, Deuce McBride is interesting. He put up really good numbers when Brunson had that late season injury. I think the Knicks really like him and think he can, outperform expectations. But I don't think that they should like count on him, matching what he did last year when they were shorthanded, right? Like it's going to be these young guys, they make their mark and then the league figures them out a little bit. And then all of a sudden teams start like, okay, when he comes in, it's not just, it's a bench guy. Like he's a good shooter. He can make a little bit. So I don't think McBride is like necessarily worthy of fantasy relevance right away as a backup, but he's one injury away with the Knicks were depleted last year because of injury, which made them have to next man up, right? And that could be the same situation this year. But like starting off this season, I don't think McBride is really going to get enough playing time.
Yeah, that's the thing. The Knicks really got rid of their depth in this trade, and OG Anunoby is not a pillar of health. Other than McBride and Campaign, their main bench guys are going to be Mitchell Robinson, who's going to miss the starting of the season, and Precious Achiuwa. So Tibbs already rides his starters heavy minutes. He's going to ride them heavy minutes again here. Josh Hart might not want to play 40 minutes a game, but he's probably going to get around 35, 36, whether he wants it or not. So, we started out with talking some winners. Who do you think is a loser in this trade from fantasy basketball's perspective?
I'm looking at Jaden McDaniels. There was a lot of hype surrounding McDaniels last year. He was a top 100 player in 8 category leagues 2 years ago, and then kind of fell off. There wasn't a boost in any statistical category. There were some drops, and you don't like to see that while the Timberwolves were also getting good. Like maybe if the Timberwolves weren't good and he wasn't performing well, it'd be like, oh, we just need to get McDaniels going. McDaniels not. On court, he's great. He's a great defender. I feel like he can help them win, and he'll still get playing time. But Donte DiVincenzo is an elite three-point shooter, made the 3rd most three-pointers in the league last year. Getting rid of Cat opens up a huge need for three. They already kind of needed three-point shooting in Minnesota, even with Cat there. Cat was their best three-point shooter. He's gone. DiVincenzo could push McDaniels for playing time. He could push him for that starting spot at some point in the season. I don't think it'll necessarily be right away. But I think McDaniels' fantasy value takes a big hit with this trade just because of what we saw last year and him probably turning into one of those guys that's a better real-life producer than fantasy producer.
Yeah, I think another guy that takes a big hit here is Mitchell Robinson. He's already out till December or January with injury. I don't think Tibbs is going to start Towns alongside him. I think he likes the versatility defensively that he gets with the trio of Bridges, Anunoby, and Hart. So unless we see Mitchell Robinson get traded at some point, he could. There are definitely teams that need centers, the New Orleans Pelicans. But again, do they want to get a guy with an injury history like he has? He might be better suited to play limited minute off the bench to keep himself healthy. So I think Robinson is one of the biggest hits. Now, there are also some guys where this was a big trade, but you're like, I don't really feel one way or the other that this did anything for their fantasy value. Anybody in your mind there, you think this is kind of a lateral move for them?
Yeah, I mean, you talked about Precious Achiuwa earlier. Like he's still going to have a role, right? And like you said with Mitch Rob, it's probably better that he isn't playing a bunch of minutes. But before this trade, and there was question marks about whether Achiuwa could be their starting center, right? So I feel like that kind of just like solidifies the fact that Achiuwa is probably going to be that 20-minute guy off the bench. He's going to play some small forward. He's going to play some power forward. He's going to play some center. He's just like that gadget guy. We saw him have, I think it was like 2 weeks of brilliance in fantasy last year, right? Like he was awesome. And anybody who had him was like, I'm going to draft this guy again next year. No, that he'll probably have another stretch like that if, and like you talked about Anunoby's health, Mikal Bridges doesn't get hurt. Cat gets into foul trouble sometimes. So there may be games, there may be a week where Achiuwa could be fantasy relevant. But I think for now, he's just that backup forward in a Thibs lineup, like you said, where he's just going to run the starters into the ground from the get-go.
How excited do you think Tibbs was when he found out they were getting Mikal Bridges? I mean, he is – ask Luol Deng how his knees are feeling, how many minutes he played him. If Bridges could play 83 games this season, which he did once, if he could do that, I think Tibbs would have him do that. He'll have him play 35 minimum minutes a night. I'm sure Tibbs is ecstatic to have Bridges on his team.
Absolutely. You're probably going to hear it a bunch from me throughout the season, but I'm a pretty conservative fantasy player in basketball. I'm looking at how many games do people play. That is my number one source. Then you can go down and look at the rest of the statistics. But if you aren't on the court, you can't make an impact in fantasy. You look at a guy like Domantas Sabonis. I targeted him super heavily in a bunch of leagues last year, and obviously that was I was rewarded for that. But you looked at his track record before that, and he was an all-around guy. He put up the stats, but most importantly, he was on the court all the time. And Mikal Bridges is going to be on the court every game and probably for most of the minutes every game. So people are concerned that he's not going to have as much usage as he did in the Nets, but the Nets were just a dumpster fire. So I still really like Bridges this year. And I think, like you said, I think Tibbs is very, very excited to have him on the roster.
Yeah, Bridges won't have the same kind of usage rate that he had as when he was the leader of the Nets, but his floor for minutes, his floor for games played. And Tibbs loves defensive versatility, and that is Bridges to a T. So I think he'll play enough that he'll have a big enough high floor. Now, I think a guy that comes out kind of a wash in this trade, even though he changed teams, is Julius Randle. I mean, Towns was the second leading scorer on the Timberwolves last season. Randle is a very different player in that he doesn't shoot three-pointers as well as Towns does, but someone's going to need to score, and Randle's is never shy about jacking up shots. So I think he's going to step right into a big role with the Timberwolves and score plenty.
Yeah, the only thing I have to add about Randle is there was it's probably a rumor at this point. It was Brett Siegel from Clutch Points. He said that Randle probably wasn't going to be full go during training camp because of the shoulder surgery that he underwent last year. If you remember, I'm sure you do. He kind of put off having surgery, right? And waited until the end of the season. So while he did miss a large, like half of the season, he hadn't had the surgery yet. So he still needed the offseason to get ready. But then Tibbs kind of was just like, yeah, no, he's going to be fine. I don't think I would be shocked if Minnesota did make this deal without like having certainty that Randle was going to be healthy. So I think I'm going to proceed with the idea that Randle will be 100% by the regular season. And I think you're absolutely right. He's going to score on this team. He should get a lot of one-on-one looks, which he didn't necessarily ever really get in New York. So I think that could be like you said, it's kind of neutral. Like there are some ups, there are some downs, but I think when it's all said and done, he'll probably put up similar numbers to what he had in New York.
Yeah, he has a lot of quote unquote role type starters around him. Other than Anthony Edwards, Connolly's mainly a facilitator who's going to get 3 assists. Then you got McDaniels as the defensive stalwart, and the same thing with Rudy Gobert. None of those 3 guys is going to take a lot of shots. So while you do have DiVincenzo and Naz Reid now stepping into an important role, because they can't just – I don't think Randle's going to be able to shift over to center like they did with Towns when Gobert took a seat. So I think, Naz Reid's going to have a big role, but Randle is going to need to score quite a bit. And this is a fun trade in terms of wins and losses. Do you think this helps the Timberwolves, hurts them, or is about the same?
In terms of wins and losses, I think this – I don't think they're going to win as many games as they did last year, but I think this does open up roster flexibility for Ant's prime years, right? Cat was getting paid $50-60 million for the next 3-4 years. So I think moving off of that contract and, like we said, getting a similar production type player. They're not similar players, but like similar production in return. You kind of have the same roster. And then you can have the option to make big time moves in the next couple of years when Ant is really hitting his peak. So I think it's a yes and no answer. No, I don't think they win as many games as next year, but I do think that they'll be a better overall team for the next 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the big things that, quote unquote, the Knicks won the trade because they get the best player, but they also got the worst contract. Yeah. They've kind of pushed all their chips in here with this Bridges and Towns trade. Their roster flexibility is just about done, while this opens up some possibilities for the Timberwolves going forward. Well, we are just getting started here. We've got some more conversations coming up about players that change teams during the offseason. But first, let's hear a word from our great sponsors at DraftKings Pick6.
We're partnering up with DraftKings Pick6 this season, and, well, we count down the days until NBA opening night. I can assure you Pick6 has plenty of NFL offerings for us. You think a certain quarterback will throw for more than 300 yards? How about your favorite receiver scoring a touchdown this week? Check out Pick6, the newest way to play fantasy football and win cash with DraftKings. Here's how it works. Pick 2 to 6 players of the same sport and choose if they'll have more or less of a given stat. We're talking yards, catches, touchdowns, etc. Lock those picks in, compete against opponents for a shot at huge cash prizes. Download the new DraftKings Pick6 app right now and use our code ROTOPICK. That's code ROTOPICK, ROTOPICK. New Pick6 customers, you play $5 on your first entry, you get $50 in Pick6 credits guaranteed. Again, that code is ROTOPICK. Play $5, get $50 in Pick6 credits. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus is awarded as non-withdrawable Pick6 credits that expire in 30 days. Limited time offer. See the terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
All right. And thank you again to DraftKings Pick6 for being a sponsor of the show. So now we've gotten that awesome Knicks Timberwolves trade out of the way, but those were not the only teams that made some moves this offseason. So as we get ready for the season, which is less than 3 weeks away, let's talk about some players that changed teams and whether or not it was an upgrade or a downgrade with regards to their fantasy basketball value. So Kirien, lead us off.
Yeah, I'm going to start with Jonas Valanciunas. He's signed a 3-year deal with Washington. Admittedly, when this news broke, I was like, what? Why? How? What's happening here? As you know, it kind of settles in as it seeps in and you start to think about it. They got Alex Sarr. This kind of like with the talking too much about the Timberwolves with the Spurs. With the Spurs last year getting Wemby, right? They wanted Zach Collins to play center, and then we saw Wemby really like flourish as a fantasy player when he moved to center. And the Spurs got a lot better too. So I think this is kind of just like a protection for Alex Sarr. You let Valanciunas play 25, 28 minutes a night. You let him bang with the big guys. You don't get Alex Sarr beat up as a rookie. And you know, Valanciunas is a very solid player. I know the Pelicans surprisingly moved on from him. And like you mentioned earlier, now they have a huge hole at center. But Valanciunas is 1 year removed from being a double-double threat for 4 consecutive seasons. He's getting up there in age, but so is Malcolm Brogdon, and he's probably going to be the Wizards' point guard. So I think the Wizards have this weird mix of veterans and young guys. Valanciunas might get moved at some point if the Wizards win, and they will probably fall out of playoff contention. But for now, for the start of the season, I think Valanciunas could be a steal in later rounds. I think his value definitely goes up. He's not having to share the court with CJ McCollum. Pelicans also got DeJounte Murray, so that would have been another guy. Brandon Ingram takes touches away from him. So I think he comes into Washington. He's kind of just like that veteran guy that the young guys can lean on, and he should be able to have an impact and rack up stats at least early on in the season.
Well, like you said, he is a walking double-double, and there's going to be plenty of rebounds with Jordan Poole jacking up those ugly shots from anywhere and everywhere on the court. One of my winners that we'll talk about here now, if you've heard me before, yes, I am a Bulls fan. No, I have not made this pick because I am a Bulls fan. I'm going to go with Josh Giddey here. I think this is a big upgrade for him being dealt from the Thunder to the Bulls. He had clearly fallen out of favor with the Thunder. He had only averaged 25 minutes a game last season. Now, remember, he is 1 season removed from averaging 16.6 points, 7.9 rebounds, and 6.2 assists per game. He is not a great three-point shooter. That is going to be a big problem for the Bulls. However, he was efficient in other departments. He shot 47.5% from the field last year, and he also shot 80.6% from the free throw line, which is an improvement for him. He's going to play a ton on the rebuilding Bulls. I do think eventually no one wants Zach LaVine right now. Eventually, someone's going to want Zach LaVine when he can show that he's healthy. A little bit more money comes off that contract, and maybe there's an injury to a contending team and they need a player. So I think Giddey is going to start. He's going to play a lot. Right now, his ADP is 70 on Yahoo and 85 on ESPN. I think that's a good deal for a guy. As long as you can, he's not going to give you much in defensive stats. He'll give you maybe a 3 a game. Points, rebounds, and assists, and good efficiency from the field and the free throw line makes Giddey one of the big winners for me here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, we're getting to know each other too. I'm also a Bulls fan. I reside in Wisconsin. Sadly,
Yes.
I haven't really owned them as my team for the last, handful of years. It's kind of tragic. Alex Barutha calls them the mid 3. the DeMar's gone now, but Vucevic, Lonzo was there for a little bit. But yeah, I'm a big Bulls fan. Derrick Rose stole my heart early on in my life, and I'll RIP to him. Not RIP, but sad to see him out of the league. I'm sure he'll get a coaching job somewhere because he's absolutely fantastic. I agree with you on Giddey. I liked Giddey last year. I'm in a keeper league. I actually extended it. It's a keeper league with contracts. I actually extended him going into last year, and that turned out to be an absolutely terrible decision. And so then I traded him, and now he's going to be good again. So I've made the wrong decision twice, but maybe I made a good decision once in there. Two left make a right. Maybe, I don't know. Giddey in Chicago should be the lead point guard. You got Kobe White. You move on from Zach LaVine. There are some pieces around here. He's going to get you points, rebounds, not a ton of points, but he's going to get you a lot of steals and assists, or a lot of rebounds and assists. So I think he's a very solid player. People are overlooking him because of what happened in OKC and being like, oh, you can't be a good player on a good team. Like, that's not how the NBA works. He's going to a bad team now. He's going to be a lead dog. I couldn't agree more with this pick. There isn't as high of an upside, right? Like you mentioned the lack of 3-pointers, you mentioned the defensive stats not being there. So it is kind of a give and take, but I think he's going to be a super solid pick in the middle to late rounds. I'm going to stick with kind of a similar situation. I'm going to Detroit, sticking in the Midwest with another team that's probably going to be at the bottom of the standings. Tobias Harris, I think it's a big upgrade. I don't think he really got a fair shake in Philly. I feel like he always kind of got blamed for the things that went wrong. You know, there are some notable, terrible performances in the playoffs from him. But if you look at his stats on the whole, he's an all-around contributor with super solid shooting efficiencies. He's a guy that can flirt with 50, 40, 90 any given season. You go to a bad team, maybe he gets a little, gun happy and chucks up a bunch of shots and that efficiency drops. But I don't really think that's like the type of player he is. I think he's going to fit with the Cade Cunningham, the Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren. He's not going to be asked to save their franchise, right? He's just going to come in and beat Tobias Harris. And I think that might get the best out of him. Maybe it's some wishful thinking, but I kind of like him to have a resurgence for a bad team and maybe help them fight out of the dweller in the East.
Yeah, it was kind of surprising how he just was more passive than usual last season, even with Embiid missing more than half the season. It might just not have been a good fit for him with the 76ers championship aspirations, star player who's constantly hurt. The pressure is definitely not nearly as much now that he's a member of the Pistons, a team that's just trying to bring themselves out of the basement and become relevant again. So he might be more comfortable in that situation. Yeah, I definitely could see a bounce back situation. He's another guy you kind of mentioned with Valanciunas that we might need to monitor once trade deadline rolls around. But yeah, he's set up for a good bounce back season on a team that will definitely provide him with a lot less pressure. Mine, I am not going to go with a current member of the Bulls, but a former member of the Bulls. We might have to rename this the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball / Bulls Fan Podcast. We might get some notes from Nick to nix that, but we'll workshop it a little bit. So I'm going to go with Andre Drummond, former Bull here, now member of the 76ers. I think he is the perfect backup for Joel Embiid. Now, Joel Embiid has never played more than 68 games in a season. I mentioned last year he only played 39 games. Drummond only averaged 17 minutes a game with the Bulls last season. He still averaged 8.4 points and 9 rebounds a game. Now, he was stuck behind Nikola Vucevic, who was traditionally one of the more healthier players in the league. But he did get to make 10 starts in place of Vucevic last season. In those 10 games, Drummond averaged 14.1 points, 17.9 rebounds, and 1.8 blocks. Right now, Drummond's ADP on Yahoo is 140. On ESPN, it's 139. I will say this right now. If you draft Joel Embiid, you must draft Andre Drummond. I rest my case.
I think that's totally fair. I think you'd be doing a disservice to yourself if you didn't have a backup for Joel Embiid. Andre Drummond yesterday at media days, he was like, "I'm the greatest rebounder in NBA history," and I can't really argue with him. Per 36, when he is out the court, the dude eats up rebounds. I advocated I thought the Thunder, instead of trading for Gordon Hayward, I don't know what that was, should have made a trade for Andre Drummond to kind of protect Chet during the playoffs. I thought that would have been a perfect fit. I really like what Philly's doing here. Embiid also said, he's like, look, I got my MVP. I've got my 7-time All-Star, whatever it is. I got all my All-Stars. I want to win in the playoffs. And I don't care about the 65 game rule to be, eligible for all of the awards. I want to be healthy for the playoffs. So even if, now he was behind Vucevic, like you said, who notoriously plays in a bunch of games. Now he's behind Embiid, and he should get 10 to 15 starts at bare minimum, maybe even more. So I think that's like absolutely a fair play, and it's a very nice insurance policy for those who drafted Embiid.
Yeah, I could see Embiid starting, or Embiid. Yeah, Embiid's going to start at least 20 games, hopefully. I could see Drummond starting at least 20 games this season. There is no need for Embiid to push. Like you said, he's already gotten the personal accolade of the MVP. There's a lot of noise now of can he actually be a winning player to get them in a deep run in the playoffs. So he's going to want to make sure he's healthy for that run. There's also not as much pressure on Embiid to be productive this season with Paul George in the fold. George and Maxey can carry the team for a while if Embiid needs to take a week or 2 weeks off or arrest any sort of nagging ailment. So I think that's going to be a great spot for Drummond. Now, we can't all be winners, and we can't also always talk about the Bulls, but there are some losers here on the fantasy basketball side of teams, of players that change teams. So, Kirien, we can't talk about all the guys, all the rainbow and sunshine here. What's a negative one on your books?
Well, we can keep talking about former Bulls because I'm going to talk about DeMar DeRozan. Look, he's going to be the number 3 option for the first time in his career. He's getting older. I just don't really see him being able to put up the statistical numbers that he has in the past. I think he's going to be a good fit in Sacramento. I just don't see how he could replicate what he's been doing, especially when he had the one really fantastic season with the Bulls. De'Aaron Fox is a superstar for all intents and purposes. This guy can go up against the best of the best and come out on top more often than not. Domantas Sabonis needs the ball in his hands. He is a triple-double threat. He's going to get rebounds. He's going to push the pace. He's going to do the dribble handoffs and everything. DeMar will have his nights, sure. But, like I said earlier, I'm a conservative fantasy player. I want guys that are going to be getting their numbers consistently on the court, doing the same thing night in and night out. And I don't think DeMar really has that role anymore. I think he's going to be the guy that, every third night, every fourth night, sure, he gets hot and then they feed him. But this offense runs through Fox and it runs through Sabonis. I think DeMar would even admit that to you guys. And I think that might have been one of the reasons why it was attractive to go to Sacramento. I think maybe he kind of thought that's what it would be like in Chicago with LaVine and Vucevic. Like maybe he wouldn't have to do so much. And then we asked him to do literally everything when Lonzo got hurt. So I think now that he's in Sacramento, he's going to not necessarily take the back seat, but he's going to be, the old head at the gym. He's going to let the young bucks run around and tire themselves out. And then he's going to be like, oh, fourth quarter, I'm going to hit 3 or 4 big mid-range jumpers, give us the win, and walk out with my 18 points on 7 for 12 shooting or whatever. And for that night, DeMar's going to have a great game for like them winning, but it's not, you're going to look at the box scores and you're going to be like, he's not putting up the numbers that he used to. So I think he's probably a loser in fantasy, but he's still a winner in my heart.
Oh, look at that. And you even dropped the we when talking about the Bulls. We're definitely going to get an email from Nick after this. But I completely agree with you with DeRozan. He is now the reliable veteran for Fox to lean on in clutch situations. Fox is one of the most clutch players in the league. So I don't think the situation with the Bulls is LaVine thought he was a clutch player, but he wasn't. So he wanted some of those shots that DeRozan was clearly more adept at taking. The good thing about DeRozan, availability as a skill, he plays all the time. He's one of the toughest guys in the league. He's one of the healthiest guys in the league. So that will help in terms of his fantasy floor. But exactly like you said, there's going to be, especially in the scoring department, I would assume a pretty significant drop for him this season. Now, I am going to talk about Tyus Jones of the now Phoenix Suns. This, to me, if not the best, one of the top 3 signings of the offseason. The Suns got Tyus Jones for 1 year and $3.3 million. What was everybody asleep? This was before Woj retired, so we should have been aware of what was going on here. The league should have been aware of what was going on. Jones has experience as both a starter and a backup throughout his career. He averaged 12 points and 7.3 assists as a full-time starter for the Wizards last year. Bad team, lots of minutes, played at a fast pace. So that was the perfect storm for him. Now, supposedly he's going to start for the Suns. They're going to go small. They're going to start him, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker alongside Kevin Durant and Yusuf Nurkic. The problem is he's not going to handle the ball as much as he did with the Wizards. Booker and Beal are both excellent ball handlers, are both excellent at creating opportunities for their teammates. So I think we're going to see Jones take a big hit in assists. If this lineup is not working, this Suns team has a lot of pressure to go far in the playoffs. If this lineup is not working, he's probably the first scapegoat to get moved to the second unit. Maybe they bring Grayson Allen into the starting five, something like that. So there's also the possibility he could be on the bench at some point this season. His ADP is reflecting this trade. His current ADP is 110 on Yahoo and 124 on ESPN. I would always say that Tyus Jones was the best backup point guard in the league when he was on the Grizzlies. I love that he got a starting chance for the Wizards. Even if he starts here, he's not someone I'm excited about for fantasy this season.
That's totally fair. I'm a little hesitant. I do think, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal should be able to make enough shots for him, if he is starting, for him to be a solid assist contributor, but he's not going to be scoring much. We'll see what he does defensively, and he's not going to be grabbing a bunch of rebounds. I do like his shooting percentages. They did kind of surprisingly took got better last year, even though he was playing for a worse team. That was kind of surprising. If he can maybe flirt with 50, 40, 90, I think he could crack the top 100. But like you said, last year was his best season on a bad team, and he barely cracked the top 100 in 8 category leagues. So anticipating him replicating that stats with more mouths to feed doesn't really seem all that likely. Another player where I think the small lineup might hurt them, but I'm kind of optimistic. So I think he'll be a better real life contributor, getting extra passes. Maybe he'll get a lot of hockey assists on this team and not really show up in fantasy, but he's moving the ball well. And then you mentioned Grayson Allen. That dynamic between them is going to be really interesting. And I was surprised at media days yesterday. Grayson was one of the guys that recruited Tyus there to Phoenix. So they're already kind of friends. We'll see how that goes when they're fighting for minutes and playing time.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so we've got to have a stick. We're trying something here. We can't do an old man rant. That's Ken's thing. We're not as old as Ken, so. We're going to do something a little different. We're going to do this each week throughout the season. We're calling it the What Was That Stat Line of the Week. Now, of course, there's no games right now. So we're going to refer to some players from last season. What we're going to do in this is we're going to talk about a stat line that was either crazy good or crazy bad or surprised us. And we'll bring that to you each week during the season. So right now, we're going to take a look at someone from last season that had a What Was That Stat Line. You're up.
Yeah, so I'm going with Tyrese Haliburton. I think this was probably talked about more than everybody already knows this. The Pacers made a run in the playoffs, and it was well documented. But Tyrese Haliburton in the first half of the season was absolutely lights out. He looked like Steve Nash on steroids. He was making threes. He was running the fast break, crazy assist numbers, crazy good 3-point shooting, was flirting with 50, 40, 90 for a long portion of the season. And then he had a little bit of, that hamstring issue. The All-Star game, I think he hit his first 5 or 6 shots, and it was in Indiana, and it was all this big deal. And Tyrese Haliburton is, he's the one up. He's going to be fighting with Steph Curry for the top point guard. He surpassed LaMelo Ball. And then the second half of the season, dude shot 30% from 3 over the final 37 regular season games. You take me to the gym right now, I can hit 30% of my threes. No.
Yeah, here we go. We're talking smack already.
So it's not necessarily 30%, 33, 34% is league average. If you're above that mark, you're a good 3-point shooter. So it wasn't like he was so awful, but it was just the fact that he was so good early in the season that second half, it was, what was that? What are you doing, Tyrese? Pacers were still good, so I don't think there's a super concern going into this season, but I do think he needs to be above 35% for this offense to really click this season.
Yeah, this is a great point. He was a first-round pick last year, was awesome out of the gate, expected to be one of the top players in fantasy with his ability to be efficient, contribute in so many different categories, and that injury just derailed him completely. I mean, he was pushing to hit the 65 games played so he could be eligible for the awards, and there was a contract thing that he needed to play X amount of games for, too, that he was trying to hit. So he was clearly playing injured towards the end of the season there. With a healthy offseason under his belt, I completely agree with you. I think we're going to see a better Tyrese Haliburton this season. I'm going to go with Franz Wagner of the Orlando Magic. He shot 28.1% from three-pointer. What was that? Now, he shot even worse in the playoffs. He was 26.5% from deep. His rookie season, he shot 35.4% from behind the arc. His second season, he improved on that even further, 36.1%. So for him to have that drop-off last season was a real surprise. He had clearly lost confidence in the shot during the playoffs. He looked like a broken player. Now, as bad as he was from three last season, he averaged just under 20 points, 5.3 rebounds, 3.7 assists, 1.3 steals, or 1.3 three-pointers, and 1.1 steals. Also, he shot 48.2% from the field, so it didn't impact his overall efficiency dramatically. And he shot 85% from the free throw line. So, can he get his confidence back? I think that's a big part of the issue here. Is he was in the tailspin last season and he never got right. So can he get his confidence back? Right now, his ADP is 46 on Yahoo. That's putting a lot of faith in him bouncing back in the three-point department. It's 68 on ESPN. I don't think he's going to shoot under 38% again, or 28% again. I think that was a complete anomaly. It was a broken guy mentally. But can he shoot over 33%? Can he get back up to 35%? That will be what helps take his fantasy value to the next level.
His shot never was super aesthetically pleasing, but like you said, he did have really good shooting numbers, especially from deep early in his career. So I don't really know what happened. I think he might have just gotten into his head a little bit. Good free throw shooter. That kind of gives you confidence, like you said, that he can bounce back from three. I will say, watching him during the Olympics play for Germany, that shot still wasn't there at all. So that, it's kind of it's definitely concerning. It was definitely worthy of a what was that? I had Franz in multiple leagues last year, and I was dominating the 3-point category early on, and then all of a sudden I was like, what did they twin swap? They're not twins, but did Mo take your powers or something? What's going on here? That super concerning. If Franz could have made 2 or 3 more threes in that playoff series, the Magic might have, gone on a little run themselves. I'm still I think the defensive foundation in Orlando is super solid. And I think Paolo and Franz are a great 1-2 punch. If Franz can get back to that 3-point level that he was at early in his career, he could be a star and this team could go places. But if he shoots again like that, he's going to be on the what was that quite often this year.
That's right. Well, we haven't gotten any messages from management here that we've done anything wrong. So I think it's time that we quit while we're ahead. So again, we are going to be joining you every Wednesday this season. We're giving you all the fantasy basketball insight you need to win your league. We want to thank our sponsor, DraftKings Pick6, for sponsoring the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. He is Kirien Sprecher. I am Mike Barner. And thank you and good luck during your fantasy basketball drafts.
Good luck, everybody.